Welcome, everyone, again to our interviews from Israel. Today we have the pleasure and the privilege of speaking with Professor Medzini, and as always, his understanding and knowledge of the history of Israel and the events that are taking place currently is unmatched in my perception from anyone else that is reporting on these matters. So I am so privileged to have you with us, Professor, and I would turn it over to you and you can give us your feelings and evaluations of what is taking place now.
Thank you very much, Gary. Always a pleasure to being with you, and a belated Happy New Year to everybody. We
Thank you, thank
we
you.
are marking today day number 93 to the Gaza war, almost 100 days since that dreadful October 7th. And what I would like to do is sort of an assessment, sum up what have happened in the last 3 months, because we are still very much at war. In fact, in certain respects, the war has expanded. And
Yes.
what I'd like to do is, where do we stand now? Well, as you know, the war started as a result of an attack on Israel in the southern part of the border of Gaza on October 7th, 2023. Probably the worst attacks on Jews in general, on Israelis in particular, since the Holocaust. And since then, we
Yes.
have fought the longest war Israel has experienced since 1948, close to 100 days, which is a very, very long time. Now, what have we achieved so far? We have managed to seize and capture the northern part of the Gaza Strip and effectively clean it out of Hamas terrorists. We did manage to cause a great deal of destruction in that area, but we are still not finished there. There are still occasional nests of opposition, and the army is not yet fully done with what we set out to do. The army is now busy. It's called stage number 3 in acting in the central part of the Gaza Strip, specifically the city of Khan Yunis, which is the second largest in the Gaza Strip. And we still have another city, and that's called Rafah, and that is the border town between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. We have not achieved the two purposes for which we set out to go to war. Namely, we have not fully destroyed the Hamas, its capacity to create havoc. We have not yet destroyed, killed, captured, eliminated the leadership of Hamas, specifically number one man, Yahya Sawar. We did manage to get hold and eliminate number two, Aruri, in Beirut, out of all places. Yahya Sinwar, who is the number one, is still at large and apparently still able to issue commands and to run at least parts of the southern part of the Gaza Strip. We have not yet managed to bring about the release of the Israeli hostages that were captured on day one. Initially, 230 odd Israelis were captured, of whom quite a few have been released in previous arrangements. There remain 136, of whom we assume 24 are no longer alive. And therefore, we're now talking of about 114 Israelis of all ages, ranging from 1 year old to people in their 80s. And of course, we are increasingly concerned because they have been captive for almost 100 days. some of it without medicine, without glasses, without proper food, without proper treatment, a year-old baby without baby food, and so on. Therefore, there's enormous concern and there's enormous pressure on the government to do something to bring about their release. Trouble is, it's not up to us, it's up to Hamas. And the demands Hamas is making are virtually impossible. In other words, sometimes they say stop the war for at least a month. On other occasions, they said we will have nothing to do with any exchange before the Israeli army leaves completely the Gaza Strip. In other words, these are demands that Israel certainly cannot accept. Right. The war has so far cost us a fortune. In terms of Israeli currency, it's 207 billion shekels, which would be equivalent to about $60 billion. And that is very, very costly. Obviously, and that is even precedes the financial cost. The war has cost us, I think, by now 165 dead soldiers, including a woman soldier today. And that is a very large number. Add to that at least 450 who were killed on day one of the war, and you get close to 600 odd soldiers. That is a very high price that we're paying. In fact, there's not a family that has not lost anyone, and that includes a former chief of staff, Gadi Eisenkot, whose son was killed a month ago. That includes a soldier who was killed, who was buried today. His father is a retired general, used to be the IDF spokesman. That was someone we know quite well. I don't think there's a family in Israel that doesn't know anyone who is either affected or is a hostage or as a casualty. There are probably about 2,000 wounded soldiers, and part of the problem is that many of them are going to be afflicted with post-traumatic syndromes for quite a long time to come, which requires psychological help, which is not always available, certainly not at this stage of the game. Something else. The war has now expanded. And if we thought we're going to fight on one front alone, we're mistaken. There are increasing signs that we're in trouble on the northern border. And basically, we have no idea if the tension and the cross-border shooting, firing, shelling could expand into a major war with Lebanon, which means a two-front war. But we have another front, and that is the West Bank, which is less written, less discussed, but there are a lot of trouble brewing in the West Bank. Mm-hmm. The Golan Heights have been relatively quiet, although from Syria a number of shells were lobbed at the Golan Heights. And we have a fifth front, and that is the naval front with the Houthis, the Yemenite Houthis, who have effectively imposed a naval blockade on the southern entrance to the Red Sea. The entrance is called Bab el-Mandeb. But here, at least, this is now an international problem, which is affecting virtually all maritime nations, including, for example, Chinese, Japanese, Europeans, perhaps even Russians, all those who use the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. There are estimates if probably some 30% of all containers go through the Suez Canal. Some people say that 10% of all international shipping goes through the Suez Canal. And a country that suffers very badly from this is Egypt, because they're losing tolls. The toll fees from the Suez Canal provide a fairly hefty sum for Egypt, and they're pretty annoyed about the whole thing. I don't know what they could do. Obviously, behind all this is Iran. And at the moment, there's not much that can be done on Iran, against Iran, in Iran, unless we have full support. At this stage of the game, we have the support of the United States. Secretary Blinken, I think, is coming tomorrow on his 5th visit since the war started. And we're very lucky to have American support, but the dependency on America brings with it a certain price. The Americans have asked us to be a bit more gentle when it comes to dealing with civilians and to limit some of the targets that we are after, and to be a bit less vociferous about what we're doing. And above all, the Americans would like to know, as by the way most Israelis would like to know, what happens on the day after. In other words, where do we go from here? And there are some Israelis, including Netanyahu at the beginning, who said, look, we don't know. We have to think about this seriously while the war is still on. And we are not yet sure how it will end. We don't want to make any commitments regarding the day after. There are others, including the Americans, who say, look, we want to know. The Israeli army would like to know very much, because the army says to the government, tell us what's going to happen, and we will suit our operations in that respect. What is emerging is roughly as follows. Israel would like to retain security control over the Gaza Strip. In other words, to ensure that Hamas does not take over again, that we are not going to be subjected to rockets. Incidentally, there was a rocket about 2 hours ago from the Gaza Strip, which destroyed a house in a moshav called Yachini, not far from the old border with Gaza. And therefore, it's not over. They're still capable of firing missiles at Israel along the Gaza Strip area. But we want to have security control. The key question is, who will look after the 2.1 or 2.2 million Palestinians? Many of them have now lost their homes. The estimates are that probably about 60% of the houses in the northern part of Gaza are no longer habitable. And I'm not sure yet about the southern part of the Gaza Strip. And we are constantly being told that there is going to be famine and there's terrible humanitarian problems on the Arab, on the Qatari television chain, Al Jazeera. They have just shown pictures of a market in Jabalia, which is the northern part of it. Today's market day, my God, it's full of people and full of goods. I don't know if that is part of what they're smuggling from Egypt, or is this part of the humanitarian aid that everybody's been talking about? There's something else that worries us increasingly, and that is the huge increase in anti-Semitism in various places. I'm not talking about Harvard and University of Pennsylvania and other places. I'm talking about massive anti-Israel demonstrations in London. You may have noted, we have noted, that in New York on New Year's Eve, you couldn't go to Times Square because there were more policemen than the people who were celebrating, because they were terrified of basically anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic attacks, which concern us enormously. And to add to all this, on Thursday, there's going to be a session of the International Court of Justice. where South Africa, with Palestinian, probably Jordanian instigation, launched basically a lawsuit against us, accusing Israel of genocidal acts. And unlike the previous occasions where we ignored the court, we decided this time to argue. And we're going to send there, Israel has allowed a representative judge. We're going to send there the man who was for many years the president of our Supreme Court, in other words, our Chief Justice, a wonderful man. We know him quite well for many years, Aaron Barak. But this could create a stain. It could it could hurt our image and a growing sense of isolation. And the moment Israel feels it's isolated, then, of course, the tendency is to, we'll show them that we're not going to be afraid of all this. The interesting and the good thing, there are still some very positive things. First and foremost, we still have the support of many, many Jews and non-Jews. And I plead through you, your people, your friends, your followers, your congregants. We need your moral support. We need your emotional support. We need you, if you can, come and visit us. It's extremely important because tourism is virtually dead in Israel. We need for you to write to your congressmen and senators and encourage them to ensure that American support for Israel continues. That is extremely important for us in times of basically things are not as we expected. So in all respects, at the moment, still a long way to go. And nobody is sure how long it'll last in Gaza, and nobody has a clue if the Lebanese front is not going to explode as well. Again, this afternoon, we have I don't know, you've probably been there a number of times. Our northernmost city is called Metula. And a few hours ago, a hotel building was destroyed.
Wow.
And the last key question that we're facing is this. For the first time in our history since 1948, 120,000 Israelis have been displaced. 60% in the south and 60% in the north. And they are dispersed throughout the country, some with relatives, some in hotels, some have been found apartments. Those in the south have a problem because many of their buildings were totally destroyed, especially on October 7th. Those in the north have homes to go back to. And they are asking the government point blank, how long are we going to be in hotels, which is destructive in terms of family life, in terms of education for children. And of these 120,000, at least 85,000 are children. Children have to go to kindergarten. Children have to go to school. In other words, life has been totally disrupted for this type of population. In other words, patients are running a bit thin here as well. But I'm an optimist. And at some point, we will overcome this. Key problem is at what price and what will be the residue in terms of Israeli sentiments, Israeli minds, and even more so, willingness somehow to coexist with the Arabs. I think I'll stop here. If you want to ask me questions, that's wonderful. If not, I'll hand you over to my son.
Well, I do have a question on this issue of the elimination of the Hamas leadership. My understanding is that there's a potential that some of the main leadership is no longer in Gaza and has left the area. So, if that is the case, will Israel pursue them outside the boundaries of Gaza or Israel?
Most likely, yes. Obviously, depending where they are. What is more serious, if you may be right, some of the leaders may have already gone. Our concern is that they may have taken with them some of our hostages and
Yes.
brought them over to Egypt, because there are still tunnels operating between the strip, the southern part, and Egypt. We now realize what they've done in the last 15 years, billions of dollars, theoretically charitable money, went into the construction of underground tunnels through which you can drive trucks. Huge things.
Right.
And therefore, we are no longer sure. We know that Sinwar, number one man, is still alive. Def, probably one of the number two, is still alive. Others are in Qatar. One or two, well, there was one in Beirut. He is no longer with us. And there are probably a number in Turkey. And Israel has to ask itself very simple questions. Do you want to intensify your enmity with Turkey, for example? I want to add one more thing, Gary. Happily and curiously enough, the relations between Israel and those countries with whom we signed agreements, either peace treaty, Jordan
Yes.
and Egypt, or normalization agreement, Morocco, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, these have not yet been badly hurt. The Jordanians are very unhappy. The Jordanians, they're terrified that at some point, uh, people from Gaza would say, okay, we're prepared to leave Gaza provided we go to Jordan. And the Jordanians say we have millions of refugees from Syria and from Iraq and from various places. We don't want them. And therefore, the
Right.
Jordanians have sort of stiffened their opposition, but I do not see them breaking off ties with Israel, certainly not Egypt.
Good.
And the other Arab countries, so far, so good.
Good. That is good news. That's really good news. Um, you mentioned about the tunnels and the finances. I've been wondering, is there somebody on the Israeli side that is really investigating the cost of these tunnels and trying to follow the money, because in order to bring exposure of things like the United Nations and other countries to really pinpoint where the financing of these tunnels and the infrastructure of Hamas is coming
The
from?
United Nations is present in Gaza in the form of an organization called UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Work Organization, established in 1948. And they
Right.
are looking technically after refugees. The interesting thing is that they're now looking after fifth generation refugees. Refugees don't
Yes.
die. You are now dealing with a new generation. What they are doing is they are looking after education. And for years we argued we want to see what you're teaching the younger generation, bearing in mind that half of the population of Gaza today, in other words, close to 1 million people who were born after Hamas takeover. In other words, after 2007. Those who are under 16 were born, and they get their education from UNRWA, which relieves
Right.
Arab Palestinians from the responsibility for education. And there are many, many other charitable organizations from Europe, some from America, others from other places. We have tried to track the financial resources, and it's not easy. It's done, but it's not
Okay.
easy. The key difficulty was that they could, in fact, at some point they asked us, "Do you mind selling us cement?" And what did they do with the cement? They built tunnels. And
Right.
our feeling at the time was, years ago, let's help them. Let's help their economy. Maybe if their economy will improve, then it'll be quieter on our border. Something that turned out to be extremely wrong and erroneous.
Mm-hmm.
This is so-called the concept will weaken the Palestinian Authority, will strengthen Hamas. But
Right.
that certainly has not worked out. And many international organizations ought to ask themselves now, did we make sure we had control over the money? Did we know where the money was going? Did we know which bank accounts and that sort of thing? And that is extremely difficult to track.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, one last question, kind of going back to this idea of eliminating the leadership. Is there any feeling that you have that there would ever be attempts to remove the leadership of Iran? Because I don't think that necessarily the nation or the people of Iran are completely behind the government
I
there.
imagine we leave it to the Americans, who have done a good job by eliminating Soleimani 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There is growing opposition inside Iran.
Mm-hmm.
I am not sure if eliminating this Ayatollah or that Ayatollah will take care of the problem. I'm not sure to what extent there is a viable opposition that could take over, as you had, for example, in Iraq. After
Yes.
Hussein was demolished, at least you had a structure. You had some people you could work with. In Iran, I suspect that the opposition, most of them are abroad. In London, some of them probably in America, in other parts of Europe. It's a slightly different story.
Okay. Yeah, that does make a difference if there's not something to restructure with. It creates a bigger problem. Okay, well, this has been absolutely wonderful. I wish there was better news, but I appreciate knowing this reality that some of these Arab nations with which Israel has created relationships, that this is holding fast, and we will continue to work here in America to see America hold fast. I don't like the fact that they're removing some of the support with the carrier, but we want to see this go on, and we will just continue to pray as well as anything else we can do. I really did hear what you were saying about come and visit, and we've looked into this possibility to see if there's something that really would be a support and be recognized by the people of Israel as just, again, reflecting the backing of so many in this country, so many in Christianity, that I think are a main anchor for the support for Israel and the support for the Jewish people everywhere, especially in the fight against anti-Semitism that is obviously, as you said, raging in many different directions. But I appreciate so much this opportunity with you. We will get this out as far and wide as we possibly can for people to hear and be a part of. And so thank you again, Professor Medzini, and we will work through emails to see when we can have more time with you.
Next time, I hope better news.
Better news. Okay.
Always. All
right.
the best.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.